Cleveland, Ohio, August of 1913. A driver takes a little too sharp a turn and completely flips his car at top speed. He flies 20 feet through the air, crashes into the ground, and lies completely motionless in the dirt and the dust for a full minute before slowly rising to his feet and limping over to a brand new car brought out onto the track so he can hop in the driver's seat and get right back in the game. Grand Forks, North Dakota, July of 1921. Referee Jimmy Lawrence Malone keeps getting bumped by one of the drivers, so he climbs on top of the guy's car and socks him right in the nose. Anaconda, Montana, October of 1916. A little boy watching the game loads up a thumbtack into his slingshot and sticks it right into the arm of one of the players. Hialeah, Florida, July of 1924. A mallet man falls off his car and is completely ran over by another car trailing behind. But he pops back up, drenched with his own blood, and rejoins the game like nothing even happened. Welcome to the world of auto polo, the most vivid portrayal of life and death ever brought before human vision. All right, so what exactly is auto polo, right? Like, what are the rules and where did it come from and how did a sport this crazy become so popular in the 1910s and 20s? Because just look at that newspaper article there. Tens of thousands of people used to come out to these events. They were insanely popular. Well, how about we just start at the beginning with a man named Ralph A. Henriksen, commonly considered the inventor of auto polo. According to auto polo legend, Henriksen first got the idea for the game after watching a couple of car salesmen compete to see who could push a tin can further down the road with the front wheel of their car. And somehow, watching that display lit up a light bulb in Henriksen's head, and before long, he was staging a primitive version of auto polo in an alfalfa field in rural Kansas, and then a bigger game over in Kansas City, and from there, the whole thing just began to snowball, and boom, just like that, Ralph Henriksen was the king of an auto polo empire, running games at racetracks and county fairs all across the nation. Now, if you're familiar at all with regular horse polo, auto polo really isn't all that different. The games are competed on a big dirt track with 2 goals on either end, and the object of the game is to use mallets to knock a ball that's about the size of a basketball through your opponent's goal. Whoever scores the most goals at the end of a 50-minute period wins the game. So pretty close to regular polo, right? Well, as I'm sure you know by now, the major difference is that auto polo players use cars instead of horses. And also, instead of one person on each horse, in auto polo, you got 2 guys on each car. There's the car's driver and the mallet man, whose job it is to hang off the side of the car and use their big wooden mallet to knock the ball around the arena. Typically, an auto polo car will have a little standing platform affixed to the side of the car for the mallet man to stand on, but technically, these guys were allowed to climb all over the car in order to line up a good swing. Like, look at this guy leaning way out in front of the car to try and get at the ball. In addition to the basics, there was also a few supplementary rules that you had to follow. Like, you weren't allowed to just park your car on top of the ball and just stall for time and stop the other team from reaching the ball. And you weren't allowed to get out of the car and just run around the track on your feet. And that is honestly kind of just about it. There were very few things that you were not allowed to do during an auto polo game. And in fact, the players kind of prided themselves on the lawlessness of the sport. They would oftentimes tell the press that the game was governed by a gentleman's understanding, that everybody was going to go out there and do whatever it took to win. Broken noses and head-on collisions, they were just part of the game. Sometimes spectators would come down to their local racing track to watch some auto polo for the first time ever and just recoil in shock as the players would immediately start crashing into each other intentionally, trying to tip over the other guy's car. Like, trying to wipe out your opponent was a 100% completely valid strategy. 'Cause again, these guys were gentlemen. They played to win regardless of injury to the other fellow. And let me tell you, people definitely did get injured playing this game. Constantly, players were flying through the air as their cars toppled over at 40 miles an hour, and guys were getting ran over and crushed between cars, and even the referees weren't safe. Like, look at this ref in New York who broke both his arm and his leg because he got sandwiched between two speeding cars. Like, injuries were so common that most auto polo games would have like a whole roster of alternate players sitting on the sidelines who were just waiting to come in whenever somebody inevitably took too hard a hit to get back up and keep going. Like, one of the referee's few actual jobs was to signal that a new player was needed to come out and replace the guy that just like got thrown over the fence and out of the arena and into the grass around the track. Like, truly, this was not a weaklings game. And to be honest, it kind of seems to me like the mayhem and destruction was sort of like the entire appeal of the sport, or at least the marketing really made it seem that way. Almost every single newspaper article or advertisement that I found for auto polo focused very heavily on the danger element. Like, just look at this ad for an auto polo match in Kansas in 1915. Tuesday, May 25th, come see the world's greatest drivers in a contest for supremacy. The thrilling climax of modern achievements. The world's most sensational sport. Just really making it seem like it's this super prestigious test of athletic prowess, right? But then if you look at the actual pictures that they put in the advertisements, it's just two images of cars crashing horribly. Basically, every ad for auto polo is exactly like that. They're constantly talking about how it's this game of playing with fate where one wrong turn could mean death for the driver. And, you know, in fact, I actually had a really hard time finding non-crash pictures of people playing auto polo. Like, 90% of the images that made it into the advertisements and the newspapers were just of people flying out of the car and flopping all over the track, and very rarely did I find any normal pictures of the players just like sitting in their cars or swatting at the ball. Like, I literally could not find even one single picture of somebody scoring a goal, which is supposed to be the whole point of the game. I got 10 billion pictures of these horrific crashes and not a single image of somebody just hitting the ball through the goalposts. Hey everybody, real quick update. I found a picture of someone scoring a goal. Yeah. But hey, at least the promoters would sometimes have Turkish bathhouses at the fields so that the players could get in some relaxation, which I'm sure they needed after having stuff like this happen to them. Another thing worth mentioning is that a few players actually became like minor celebrities through auto polo. Like Ray Claypool, a 19-year-old English mallet man who got interested in auto polo when Ralph Hankinson put on some matches in London in 1912. Apparently, Ray once got in a really terrible crash, and while he was recovering in the hospital, his hair slowly turned from a deep brown to a silver gray, which made him look a whole lot older than 19. Another relatively famous mallet man was Charles Adams, an American who supposedly started playing auto polo because he used to work in construction and he was swinging around on these 6-inch beams and fixing buildings 40 stories up in the air, and that was just a little too boring for old Charles. So he switched to auto polo to try and get some more thrill out of life. Another important thing to mention is that it was not just the players out there getting smashed up. The auto polo cars, too, were constantly put through the ringer. Just like with the players, every game featured a whole bunch of spare cars just waiting off the side of the track for whenever one of the starter cars like burst into flames or whatever and had to be pulled off the field. And so, of course, all that smashing cost the auto polo promoters a ton of money, between $300 and $600 a week reportedly, which is between $5 and $10 grand in today's money. Henriksen reported that in 1914, his auto polo outfit had to replace over 2,000 wheels in just a single 7-month playing season. In just one typical game, between 8 and 10 different cars might have to be brought into play, which is especially crazy because most auto polo games were played with just 1 or 2 cars on each team. Like, there was a reason that a lot of people called auto polo the most expensive sport in the world. And that expense was only compounded by the fact that all the auto polo cars were very heavily modified. Basically, the mechanics would take a normal Ford car and then strip off every single possible bit of excess weight to create a skeleton car that would be as fast and maneuverable as possible. The only things they'd really add would be that standing platform for the mallet man that we talked about, and then a roll bar that was supposed to stop the car from flipping upside down and crushing the driver. Which kind of makes you wonder, what were the safety features for the mallet man, right? Because that guy is just hanging off the side of the car. Like, what's supposed to be protecting him? Well, as this newspaper article from 1924 tells us, the auto polo driver is protected by this really ingenious safety device that totally protects him from rollovers. And the mallet man safety device is jumping clear of the car when it rolls so they don't get crushed. And you know, I feel like here is as good a spot as any to mention that researching this topic has been some of the most fun that I've ever had working on a video. Mostly because of journalists and newspapers saying stuff like this. Because I pretty much always find people saying some goofy things about whatever topic I'm looking into. But on this one in particular, the newspapers and magazines had some really, really funny and bizarre things to say about auto polo. So what I want to do here, before I tell you about the decline of auto polo, is share with you a little list that I put together. The top 20-ish craziest things that the newspapers had to say about auto polo. Starting with a funny little quip from 1912 when auto polo was exhibited in New York City for the very first time. Apparently, a journalist down in Atlanta must have heard about the event because they wrote, "Hey everybody, check it out! New York sports have just invented a new way to get killed." Here's somebody saying that auto polo is a real American game for every man, woman, and child with blue blood coursing through their veins. This guy says that auto polo is a great game and only mollycoddles don't like it. Auto polo channels the primeval human instinct to conquer. Auto polo is sure to be a hit with the gore-loving public. Auto polo is 2 wild-eyed young men intent on self-destruction. Here's an interview with a mallet man from the 1920s where the player says that he and his mallet are bosom pals. Him without his mallet is like a man without his country. Auto polo is sure to give all the World War I veterans out there a little whiff of that old war, a reminder of what it felt like to watch tanks roll through France. The best description ever given of the game is 50-minute flirt with death. Doctors and undertakers are big fans of auto polo. Here's something cool. It's the seal of the Auto Polo Association of America. I want to put that on a shirt. Auto polo players have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel. Auto polo is hell's pastime. Here's one of my favorites. It's from another advertisement that's trying to get people to buy tickets. It says, "Come see auto polo, aka flirting with death." Check this out. Before Henriksen made the sport a big deal, there was actually another version of auto polo from the early 1900s that became mildly popular for a short time. But it never reached even close to the same heights as Henriksen's polo, presumably because the cars were slower back then, and also because there was only one guy in each car, so the driver had to steer with one hand and swing with the other hand, and that probably limited how crazy all the driving stunts could get. Here's a little comic somebody drew of a guy zipping around in a car, and the caption says, "This goof just got done watching an auto polo game, and now he's trying to stage his own game in his backyard." Here's a good story where a mallet man took a big swing with his mallet and missed the ball and just smashed out the radiator of his own car instead. And last but not least, auto polo is a cross between two very important American institutions: sport and manslaughter. But all right, with all that buzz surrounding auto polo, how exactly did the sport go from attracting 20,000 people to fading away almost completely in just a couple decades? Because at its height, auto polo was not just popular in the US. People were playing it in Mexico and in Japan and in the Philippines, like you name it. So what happened? Well, the most obvious reason for the decline of the sport was its unbelievable cost that we talked about earlier. Like, it was basically impossible to run any kind of amateur polo team because you needed like a whole squad of mechanics and like a platoon of spare cars to even make sure that you could actually run the games. But even beyond the cost, it was just hard to find people who actually wanted to do this stuff. Like, in the mid-20s, the sport was still regularly attracting large crowds, but there was only enough willing players in the entire country to supply 6 teams total. Like, there just was not that many people out there who were willing to get into car wrecks for a living. And then on top of that, a lot of promoters had trouble getting insurance for their players too. And so over time, all that stuff started to add up, and the auto polo trend just kind of disappeared. There were some brief attempts to revive it in the 40s, and then in the 50s, a new version of auto polo was invented where players used cars to like push around a big giant ball. But never again did auto polo reach the heights that it held in the 10s and 20s. It was just too dangerous and way too expensive. But hey, you want to hear something really crazy? As far as I'm aware, despite all the stories that we've covered and all the insane pictures of players wiping out that we've looked at, I could not find one single account of anyone actually dying in an auto polo game. So maybe it's just about time we pick up those mallets again and give hell's pastime another shot. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Watch this trick shot. Yeah! 360. 180. No! 180. 360. That's not even close. 360. Oh no! 360. Yeah!